have.
All right. How does audio sound, Eric?
I think we're good.
Are we okay?
Are you ready?
Yeah, if I'm talking too soft, tell me how.
Okay.
I might get really excited. We don't know what's going to happen.
All right. So my first question that I have for you is, what is your name, and how did you kind of first? How were you able to display your work here in the Photo 4 gallery?
Well, first of all, my name is David Hauptchein. There's only one other David Hauptchein in the world, and he lives in Israel. And on Facebook, he goes by a different name. Okay. Sergio Gomez, who's an acquaintance, friend of mine, artist, he invited me to show my work here. We both have studios at the Joby Art Center in Bridgeport in Chicago. So that's how I got here.
Cool. What originally inspired you to become an artist, to get into art?
Well, I always wanted to be creative, and I was kind of lost as a kid because I came from a family that was not artistic at all. Supportive, but not artistic, and none of the neighborhood kids had parents that were artists and musicians. So I didn't really see art as a clear way forward. It didn't occur to me, basically. But I was searching around because I was very unhappy, and I took a summer art program at the Philadelphia College of Art when I was about 19, and the teacher gave a very simple design problem. And I started working on it, and after 2 hours I had an epiphany. It was like a religious experience. A sense of bliss went through my entire body, and I decided then I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I never looked back. I've had a bad day here and there, but other than that, no, that's it. I wanted to be an artist of some kind.
How long has it been since then?
Well, I was, let's see, that was around 1971, so do the math, it's been a long time.
Cool. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the mask behind the mask?
So, my career has been very strange and unpredictable. Okay. And the mask behind the mask, this series was never something I preconceived. Actually, I worked. Can I kind of give a little backstory here?
Sure.
Okay, because I don't want to. I might ramble on and we'll, okay. I got into visual art first, and that's what I did for the first 10 years of my career. And I'm 67 now, so many years. Then I got into performance art and playwriting, and I made a movie as well, and an experimental animated movie, which was the last visual art thing I did. So that goes backwards. But anyway, and about 5 years ago, I hired a friend of mine to make a website for me for my plays. And I said to him, we need to put some visual on this site. And I suggested that I had some images, some experimental photography, way before digital, darkroom kind of stuff that I had made back in the 70s before I even started writing. I said, maybe we can pull them out of storage, clean them up in Photoshop, and put them on the website. So long story short here is we ended up getting very involved in this. We ended up scanning 6,000 images that I had never printed, most of them. They were things that in the darkroom you just couldn't really do, but with Photoshop I could improve on them. And we never made the website, and this whole project got launched that was totally unexpected. Now, to jump ahead to the mask behind the mask, we started using the tools in Photoshop to play around. And this particular series started to emerge, like I said, totally unexpectedly. And they look like, if you I don't know if everyone sees this, but they all pretty much seem like faces to me. But very distorted faces, like if you ripped away the outer part, that's what you might see, like in this one that's right here. It's called Woman with Gray Hair, but you don't see normal features. So the mask behind the mask goes like this. I think we all sort of wear a mask. What we show each other to the outer world isn't entirely accurate representation of who we are. If we remove this mask, there's another mask behind that mask, and that would be the mask of self-deception. And in fact, I'm working on a series of self-portraits now, which I'm considering titling Self-Deceptions. So, all this is kind of heavy intellectual stuff, which I don't necessarily expect the viewer to think. but it's what motivates me what motivated me with these pictures, and what's continuing to motivate me is the mysteries, the endless mystery of the human psyche and the subconscious and what really motivates us. So I'm trying to tap into that. And if someone looks at one of these pictures and thinks in that direction, then I've succeeded.
Cool. Now, you said that when you removed your first mask, what was it called? You're thinking about calling your second series?
So I'm working on a series of, it's a huge series of self-portraits now. And I don't have a definite title yet, but just the other day I came up with this idea. Self-deceptions, the self-portraits of David Hauptchein, or something like that.
What is self-perception?
Self-deceptions.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is self-deceptions? What does that mean?
I think that we all tell ourselves narratives and stories about who we are. And in order to function in the world, there are things about ourselves that we have to disguise in some way, or conceal or suppress. And so we come up with a thesis about who we are that isn't really 100% true. And the subconscious, which was, if it wasn't invented by Sigmund Freud, it was certainly popularized or expanded on by Freud, is all the stuff that's going on in our minds below the surface of our conscious mind. And those things motivate our behavior, how we behave towards people, in our relationships, our kids. And as an artist, I'm trying to find, dig into that realm and expose it, because that's, to me, where all the great creativity is. And this comes from the Surrealist movement, which they consciously tried to get into the inner self. And they had a bunch of techniques, and I use a bunch of techniques to try to do that.
In a lot of the pieces, I see stuff like, I see like eyes, or maybe like a hand, or like, random eyeballs, or like fingers almost in these. Where do your images, like your body part images, where do they originate?
Well, so every one of these pictures, so as I mentioned, we scanned like 6,000. It might have been 8,000, but a lot of it was duplications. But there was a lot of work. Most, like I said, was never printed. All shot during the 70s when I was probably your age or younger. Okay, I was in my 20s. So there's been in this series, there's been no new photography. Now, the answer to the specific about the fingers and toes, so during that period in the 70s, I was trying to be more experimental in the approach. There was no Photoshop, so I had to do a lot of it in camera and stuff. So I was doing things like photographing in close-up, fingers and toes with dots of light on them and weird colors thrown in, and multiple exposures, and anything I could think of, throwing things out of focus. And so these pictures, most of them, the subject matter is a little hidden, although I don't care if sometimes you might see a finger or a mouth or a lip. But so that was it was like this was the raw material for my manipulations in Photoshop. Now,
that's really cool. So you worked off of kind of like who you were when you were in your 20s.
Well,
right?
It's kind of amazing. And my wife, she remarked that she couldn't believe that I left off this work in the 70s and then picked it up 5 years ago, as if no time had elapsed. It's just the technical means now was available to me, and it wasn't then. So it shows a remarkable consistency in my artistic vision that I was able to do this. And like I said, I didn't plan it. So I say consistency. That just happens to be a fact. It's not that I try. Who knows? Who knew really?
You explained. I think I looked on your website. You talk about a photo-based digital drawing, a photo-based digital painting.
Yeah.
What is a photo-based digital painting?
Now here, that's a very, very good question. So I'm doing this work now that's in a new art medium, and I don't really know how to describe it. I do not consider myself to be a photographer. I consider myself to be an artist who uses photography. I could say I'm a digital artist, but that has certain connotations that I don't really like. The fractal, the early digital art with the sort of psychedelic waves and whatever. I'm not really technically digitally painting because I'm not starting off with a black blank screen and then putting colors. There's a photograph. So photo-based digital painting seemed like a good answer, but to tell you the truth, I'm not satisfied with that either. So, but to answer your question as best I can, so I start off with a photograph, and then I push the pixels around as if it was like finger painting, sort of. And now I'm actually in the self-portraits, and there's a little bit in some of these too, I'm starting to introduce textures that actually look like brush strokes. And, you know, so they look like paintings. My goal is to be a painter, but using the digital means. Painting is my main inspiration for this, not photography.
A lot of the colors that are in your work, were they taken, because I know you said that you kind of like lit things differently. You said like back in the 70s to kind of get things to look distorted and that sort of thing, and to give them a certain feel. The colors in your work, did that stem from the work that you did in the 70s, or is that more of a thing that you incorporated now?
No, I mean, the colors that started in the 70s, a lot of them are in the pictures, but I also add a ton of colors. And so one of the problems I had in the 70s was because I didn't have access to Photoshop, I couldn't actually get what I wanted. I couldn't. Maybe somebody else could have. I couldn't. So now I'm able to add colors, and I'm able to get the range that I want. And I'm adding colors in different ways. You know, sometimes I'm just putting a like a glow around the picture that has a color, and then I blur it and push it around so it becomes integrated. You can't tell what I added and what was there originally. So it's a combination of the two.
One of the things that I noticed that kind of ties all of these pieces together is it seems like all of them are placed against a very dark or like a black background, almost like infinity. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Is there a reason why you decide to place most of the subjects in your pieces against a black background?
Well, you know, there's a technical reason actually. So when we started out, I say we because I have an assistant who helps me. He's kind of my Photoshop guru. He's the guy who scanned the original pictures. And he didn't know much about Photoshop when we started, so we learned together, and we worked together. But that's a whole other story that we probably don't have time for today. So we were progressing and trying things, and we discovered that when we put an image on a black background, we had way more control over what was going on with the particular tools that I was using. But I really liked the look of it. I liked these glowing things in this sort of unspecified arena where there were just tones. Again, getting away from documentary photography. I didn't want to look like a photograph of a place. And I just really liked the look of it. And so until we called it The Mask Behind the Mask, it was just the black background series. You know, so that was the reason. It was a technical reason. Then what happened was, after working and doing several hundred of these, it became, well, now we need to get away from the black background, and it took a while to figure out how to do that. And now my pictures don't have black backgrounds anymore. So this series is finished.
Oh, interesting. I think that the black background really helps like draw attention to your to the work within your piece. Like I like them a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, and also these are portraits in my mind. Now somebody else might not see that, but so it focuses on the face or the head. And you know, I think almost all of these have some sort of face or head in them.
Can you tell me a story? You talked a little bit about this piece here a little bit. Can you tell me another story about another piece in this show? Any piece that you would like to talk about?
Let me see. Sure. Okay, so down there, the second one from the right.
Okay.
That one is called, I believe that's called Boy with a Soft Spot in His Head.
Okay.
Now, as I was working,
yeah, I need you. Sorry.
Okay, so that one is called Boy with a Soft Spot in His Head. And as I was working on this series, I'm continually looking for new directions. I don't want to imitate myself. I don't want to get bored. And when I do get bored, the inspiration goes. That's the worst thing for me. Luckily, I've been inspired pretty much the whole time since I started working when I was 20, but I had some bad days. That's scary, because as long as I'm inspired, it doesn't matter if the world hates me, rejects me, no one likes it. I can keep going, and I'm pretty happy. Okay, so first, you know, I started with one image that I was manipulating. And then to try to get into a new arena, I would take that same image and do multiple versions of it on the black background. And then I would apply a kind of filter called liquefy, which literally can push things around like it was liquid, like mercury on a. And so, and you can, it's too technical, but anyway, so that particular image, if you notice the black there also serves as a negative space. It's not just a background. There's a shape, and then the black becomes part of the face itself. So it's like transparent almost. And I really like that. And then, you know, if you get up close to the pictures, it's all mouths and tongues. And for some reason, I just like the idea of the boy with the soft spot in his face. I mean, so it was just another angle to, you know, and I just want to say one thing about these pictures. I think they're a little creepy, and that was my intention. I'm not interested in pretty art, decorative art, you know. And you know, every once in a while, someone says, "Oh, that's pretty," and I think, maybe I failed on this one. You know, I want to disturb people. I made a self-portrait just on Monday, and I posted it on Facebook, and my wife saw it this morning, and she said, "Oh, that one's too scary. I'm not going to click like. I'm just going to comment." You know, I mean, and that to me is good. To me, because to go back to the subconscious, you know, I think I'm going to make a grand statement here. The best thing, I don't really like art that's overtly political. The reason is that art is not that good, I don't think, at changing people's minds politically, but it's really good at exploring the mysteries of the human consciousness. And if we could understand more about what makes us tick and why we do certain things and why we hurt each other, we would get better. We wouldn't be so messed up, so anxious, and so bad to our fellow humans. Art for me is a way to expand consciousness. And it's not just my art, it's any art. So I go to an art museum, my goal is to have my consciousness expanded. It does for me what drugs do for other people, supposedly. I mean, I posted on Facebook a thing, why take hallucinogens when you can make art? And some hallucinogenic types, you know, people who, you know, advocates, they jump down my throat. It's like, no, I'm trying to expand my consciousness every day that I make art. So, I don't know, I went off on a tangent here, but that kind of explains the boy with a soft spot in his face, in his skull. Because I'm trying to find out why things disturb me so much in life.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I said to Eric, some of his pieces kind of creep me out. And I didn't want to tell you that because I didn't know if that's what you were kind of going for. So I would say that you were definitely successful in doing that, because I'm like, it's almost like there's like another form like coming out of like some of them, I don't know, some of them kind of creep me out a little bit. So I'm glad, I would say that you're successful in doing that.
Well, you know thank you. You know there's I forget what it's called, but every once in a while someone is born with like a little homunculus, another little person growing out of their shoulder or something. And they usually has to be surgically removed. It was like a twin that never came to be, and they have teeth and stuff, and a tongue and mouth and legs and a little body, right? Well, I think metaphorically we all, to one degree, have these sort of things inside of us. It goes back again to the inner self. It's like, you know, we have to face certain difficult things like mortality, loss. You know, I've had some personal tragedies that I've had to adjust to. And I'm an older guy now. I can't go visit my grandparents anymore. You know, there's all kinds of things, not to speak of the things going on in the world. So in the pictures, now it could be metaphorical, but I want it not metaphorical. I want it actually visceral. I want you to feel like there's a thing growing out of the head. That's really creepy. And then maybe making the leap to, why is he doing this? Well, maybe he's commenting on the way we feel inside when things don't go well, when we find our brother in bed with our girlfriend in our parents' bed at 2 a.m, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, whatever, it happens, you know, you get an illness. So, yeah, okay. So, yeah, I didn't mean that.
No,
I said, if you get me going, that's it.
No, you're good. Can you tell me why you think it's important to have your work displayed, this series displayed at a college campus for college students to view?
Well, that's another great question. You got some good questions here. So have been showing work at the studio I have at Bridgeport, at the Joby Art Center. And one of the things I've noticed about that, and every third Friday they have an open house. The whole building opens up and all kinds of people from the public come in. It's not just the art crowd, the art elite, which is what you would get like in more commercial galleries. You know, I get a lot of younger people coming through. And a lot of them kind of remind me a little bit of me. They come in, they're a little shy, they ask a million questions, and they seem inspired in some way, you know. And whereas some of the older folks, and this generalization that just only applies to some, come in, they kind of glance around, and they've sort of decided what they like in advance and what they're not going to like in advance. And they're just not as open-minded. And I think younger people, especially college-age kids, they're just, their minds are tabula rasas. And if you can get them to kind of tune into the magic of art, they can change the course of their life. Just like what happened to me when I went to that one class and this guy gave out this little simple design project. I worked on it for 2 hours and the rest of my life was different. So yeah, I love having a college situation. I mean, I don't know who came in here, but if one person thought, what is this guy doing? I didn't know you could do stuff like this. You know, the same thing happened to me in theater, by the way. I went to a play when I was in my mid-20s, and it was not like any other play I'd seen. I thought, wow, this is an open door. And I kept it in the back of my mind, and 10 years later, I started writing plays, you know, so.
Awesome. How did you kind of begin dabbling? You're an artist, you write plays, you know, you've done some like film stuff. How have you kind of been able to delve into all of these different areas?
Well, for me, it's all one thing, art. So there is the medium, like when I was in art school at first, in undergrad, I had a lot of trouble because A, I had my own ideas, and I didn't want to be boxed in. So I would do things like, I brought a photorealist drawing to a photography class. They thought I was crazy, okay? The teacher asked me one question, and then he said, what have you learned from doing this? And I had just finished it, so I didn't have a ready answer. And then he just dropped it, and it was the last, you know, it ever came up again. It's like, if I had a student do that, because I taught for a little while, I probably would have been like, who is this kid, you know? So it's all one thing. I go where the inspiration is, and sometimes I go due to unforeseen circumstances in my life. Like, things force me in certain directions that I hadn't anticipated. I'll tell you one thing I'll try to make it as brief as possible, but I developed when I was 28 or 29 a really weird eye problem. And to this day, I still have it, and I can't do a lot of eye straining activities. And I had to stop making visual art at that point. And I refused to give in, so I started writing by dictation. I wrote 18 plays by dictation. I wrote a novel, which never saw the light of day, but it was a novel, by dictation, and a movie script by dictation. The movie got filmed and it just got finished. This work, I have an assistant who helps me and does a lot of the eye straining activities under my direction. So I will say to him, and I can look at the screen now. My condition has improved somewhat, I think, the last few years for some reason, but it's still basically, like I had trouble filling out, well, never mind. So, and I'm very sensitive to light, by the way, and I'm wearing dark contact lenses, which explains my unusual eye coloration. All right. So when we started working together, I realized that I could look at the screen, we dimmed the screen down for some period of time, and that I could direct him, and I could say, I want you to blur this, put a cyan color around it, and he's there working, and I go off in the corner and listen to music, and after maybe 10 minutes, he calls me over, and I look at it, and we go back and forth, and we have long sessions, but we space them out over like 2 times a week. So I rest in between. But the reason I told you this whole story, I'm really sick of talking about my eye problem, and I generally tend to hide it. Okay. The reason I mention this is that, so I have certain physical limitations. There could be monetary limitations. Everyone has limitations. I have artistic limitations. I just will go wherever my inspiration will take me, and sometimes I'm forced places. I had no plans to be a playwright. I was interested in theater, but I didn't think I could do it. First of all, I'm dyslexic, and my college board scores were just slightly above random guessing in the English. But when I'm listening to books on tape or dictating, I'm not dyslexic. So I was able to tap into a talent that I didn't know I had. And I've had plays produced in Chicago and London, and it's like I've had some success. So it's been a crazy ride. But there's always open doors. That's the thing.
Awesome. And finally, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, one thing I would like to add is Photoshop and digital art, it's a brand new art medium. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is any time in history a new art medium gets invented, some artist will get a hold of it and do something never before seen. So imagine if Jimi Hendrix had come of age in 1930, before the electric guitar. There'd have been no Jimi Hendrix. He might have done something else, but not the Jimi Hendrix that the world loves. And that's why I like Photoshop. And occasionally someone says to me, oh, but you should paint. And they act as if somehow what I'm doing is inferior because it's not a painting. And I'll let other people do the painting. It's still valid, but I want to see what I can do with this new art medium.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Well,
Is
thank
there anything
you.
you'd like to ask?
I was just thinking of a way of phrasing the intro, and could we possibly have him restate, like something along the lines of, hello, my name is David Hauptchein, and the man behind, or the mask behind the mask started with photographs that I started taking back in the 70s, or something like that, to just
Okay,
kind
sure.
of jump off of. What do you think about that, Caitlin?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, sure.
And you could just look at me too.
Okay, so my name is David Hauptchein, and I made this body of work, which I'm calling The Mask Behind the Mask, and it was all created between the mid-1970s and 2016. The reason, with a 30-year gap, 35-year gap, the original photos were made in the old style analog, and I wasn't happy with them. They were in storage. None of them ever saw the light of day. When I got introduced to Photoshop, I scanned them and began to manipulate them. These pictures do not resemble the original photos, but they came from the original work that I did when I was but a wee lad.
That's good.
That works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
thank
like
you.
that.
All right,
Thank
I
you.
kind of again rambled.
No,
if
you're
you want me to
good.
try it
Don't worry
again,
about
I
it.
can.
No, I
think
thought that
it's
was
good.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we got it. Thank you.
You were really good.
Oh, thank you
That's
so much.
really excellent.
I appreciate